know. Missed anything? Wait,
Setting
ready?
up your meeting for.
Welcome to Brain Verdict, a podcast where we take a deep dive into mental illness and criminality. Our host, Dr. Colin King, brings a unique perspective to this conversation with his 25 years of experience working with the many complexities of brain injury, mental illness, substance abuse system. Dr. King has worked with over 50 murders, mass shooters. He has a unique approach that involves extensive psychological assessment in addition to clinical interviews of offenders and their families. In addition to Dr. King, we have Kerry Martin, who is a staff attorney at Neighborhood Defender Service of Detroit, where he works as a court-appointed attorney for individuals who are unable to hire their own counsel. Kerry has a passion for being a voice for those who would otherwise be voiceless. Examining every detail of the cases he works on, Kerry goes the extra mile to explore areas of the law that many attorneys miss, like self-defense.
Thank you for that amazing introduction. And I think I also need to introduce Jessica. Jessica is one of my colleagues who has worked with me on quite a number of cases, a number of also juvenile lifer cases. We have worked together. Jessica is an excellent resource in terms of sniffing out issues and just getting information that otherwise probably take me about 10 years to get that information that you can get in 10 seconds.
You've gotten
Um,
better. I would say 7 years.
so thank you so much. And then on the broadcast with us is Charles Lewis. And Charles is, or I should say, he was a juvenile lifer, someone who was incarcerated for a number of years, wrongfully, I might add. And Charles is going to tell his story in a minute. So this is going to be a very interesting podcast, and I don't have to tell you don't leave. I don't think you can leave um, before hearing what we have to share with you. And so, with that, Attorney Kerry Martin, we've worked together on at least one case, and I
Yes, we
know
have.
that you have some piercing questions for us. So why don't you go right ahead?
Sure thing, Dr. King, and good afternoon to Jessica and to Mr. Lewis as well. Dr. King, let me start this off by asking you a question more in your wheelhouse than mine. As a defense attorney, I have not had the privilege to work directly with juvenile lifers, but I do know about this phenomenon, very unfortunate phenomenon that we have of kids who are confined to a prison for the rest of their lives until we had a Supreme Court decision that said they shouldn't be allowed to do that, at least not automatically. So, with that, Dr. King, what does a psychologist know about a juvenile lifer's brain?
So here is what the research is telling us. Actually, in 60 seconds or less, let me give kind of a brief overview of the human brain. So we know that the human brain maturates or matures from back to front. So, for instance, a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, one of the first things that you see them do besides babbling, right? They don't have speeches yet, is that they will try to crawl, to reach, to grab stuff, to put stuff in their mouth. And then after a while, they will kind of stand up and try to steady themselves. And then they will try to walk, right? So that's the back part of the brain being developed. And then, as they begin to grow, they get a 6, 7, 8, or 9, they begin to make decisions, right? They begin to tell you what they like and what they don't like, right? And then they become teenagers. And then, they want to drive, they want to take the car keys from you and drive, and they want to hang out with their friends, and they want to go shopping. But the brain of a teenager or a juvenile does not mature until they get to about age 22, 23, or 24. And for males, it's even a little longer. So the human brain does not reach maturity until about age 24 or 25, right? So what we have in our system Our juveniles, children, 14, 15, 16, the brain is not yet developed. And these are some of the kids that either commit a crime or are accused of committing a crime. So this is what we're talking about today when we say a juvenile and a juvenile lifer. We will explore and explain that a little better later on this broadcast. And I know that you have a couple more questions about their juvenile brain and this fascinating topic. I think you're muted, Carrie. I think you're
Yes,
muted.
thank you, Dr. King.
There you go.
About that overview on the juvenile brain. So you kind of started getting at this, but when is the juvenile brain fully developed for boys and for girls, or for men?
Yeah, and it's important for attorneys, for prosecutors, for judges, for people in general to sort of understand that these are people who look like adults. They make adult decisions, but they are not adults. Their brains are not fully developed as much as they behave and act as if those brains are fully developed. Actually, or I should say, one of the entities that has gotten it right are car rental companies. They do not rent cars. I think you have to be what, 21 or
25?
older?
25.
25, exactly. Why do you think they've done that? Because they've done their research, right? And they can see that most of the accidents are caused by people below the age of 25. It doesn't mean that if you're 25 or less, you're going to be involved in an accident. It just means that your brain is not fully developed and they don't want to take a chance with you. So
You're going to take
they
more risks.
exactly, exactly. And in talking about the risk, Jessica, you mentioned taking risk. There is something called personal fable, which a lot of juveniles go through, and they live in that zone. And what it is that they tell themselves, nothing bad can happen to me.
Mhm.
I am like Superman. So they could be 100 yards away from a traffic light that is already turned red. And personal fable says, I can still beat that light. Nothing bad can happen to me. Personal fable. So, that's how the juvenile brain functions. It's just a phenomenon that we have no control over, which is why they need guidance. And I think, yes, thank you, Carrie. I was about to say that you're muted again, but you got it. Thank you.
Well, yes, that's very enlightening, Dr. King. And as unpredictable and maybe, false Superman complex that the juvenile brain has, how is it affected by other things that might happen to a juvenile, such as adverse childhood experiences, a dysfunctional home life, or high stress levels?
Okay, thanks for the question. I'm not sure what's happening with your audio, Carrie. It seems to be going in and out, but I got your question, which is how do other things or other variables impact or affect the juvenile brain? You mentioned like adverse childhood experiences. And I know, Jessica, you and I we've done a lot of assessments and evaluations. And one of the screening measures that we routinely administer is one that is called ACEs, right? Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it has a list of 10 questions. And those questions actually target the earlier years of someone before age 18. It's actually one of the largest studies done in the US, whereby the Kaiser Foundation looked at 18,000 subjects and they asked them those 10 questions. Tell me about your life before age 18. And there's a series of questions. And anyone with an ACE score of more than 4, what the research showed is that they are likely to get in trouble, likely to encounter problems with the law, likely to have adverse health experiences. And in a number of cases, they are likely to die earlier than the other population. What are some of those adverse childhood experiences? Do you have a parent who's been incarcerated? Has anyone ever physically hit you, assaulted you? Has anyone ever tried to make unwanted sexual advances? And has anyone who's raised you ever used drugs? And once you answer yes, yes, yes to a number of those questions, and you get an ACE score of more than 4, then what the study showed is that they can actually predict your trajectory, where you're going to land, unless there is some type of an intervention. So that is critical. I'm wondering if it's not a good time for us to turn a little to our special guest, Mr. Charles Lewis. And I mentioned that Charles, I said he was a juvenile lifer, but I want Charles to tell his story. I don't think I can tell his story as Charles can. So, Charles, you go right ahead.
Okay, well, I'm 65 years old, and I was arrested when I was 17, and my brain hadn't fully developed, and I probably had 4 or 5 of those A scores. My stepfather was extremely abusive. He was a drug addict, and he was a beautiful guy, but he just had some issues and problems because he probably got 4 of those scores too. But I want to digress for just 1 second. So where in Detroit are you at?
I guess that's a question for Carrie.
Yeah, Mr. Lewis, I work for the Detroit Public Defender's Office, basically. The name of our organization is Neighborhood Defender Service of Detroit. We're located on Gratiot Avenue, not far from 36th District Court, Frank Murphy Hall of Justice.
Okay. I'm from Detroit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm from the east side. I grew up on off of East Warren,
Off of East Warren.
Joy Junior High School. Before they tore it down, I went to Denby, I went to Finney. Yeah, Detroit, I'm from Detroit,
Absolutely.
But when I was 17 years old, I was targeted by the police in 76. I don't know how familiar you are with Detroit. Are you familiar with White Boy Rick?
Yeah, I'm familiar with White Boy Rick. Yes, I am.
I think most people are, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, the police officer that targeted White Boy Rick, that paid the hitman $200,000 to kill him, that's the guy that arrested me. I was arrested and charged with the murder of an off-duty police officer, and I was apparently arrested along with 3 other individuals: Ronald Pentway, Jeffrey Mulligan, and Mark Kennedy. I have no idea why we got arrested.
Wow.
But anyway, Mark Kennedy, Jeffrey Mulligan, and Ronald Pentway, the prosecution made deals with all of them to completely get rid of all their charges if they testified against me. And so I thought that was quite strange. But anyway, my dad, my stepfather had won a little money, and he because he got beat up by the police, and we was like the Jeffersons. We moved on up. We moved a little further on the east side of Detroit when it was really nice over on Kilbourne, and I believe that's why I was targeted. I'm not sure why, but I was targeted. Later on in prison, I found out that it was a mob hit, and that I was picked to take the fall for it.
Wow.
So which is really bizarre because when I went to prison, I was a nerd. I was on the chess club, I ran track, I played on the football team, I did all that kind of stuff. So funny story, I'm in the county jail. My first day in the county jail, sitting on the floor, terrified. It's 2 guys in the shower. having a very graphic conversation about how they are going to rape me. And in the process of this happening, it's a guy sitting across from me reading the newspaper. So he said, "Hey man, your name Charles Lewis?" I said, "Yeah, why?" He said, "Hey, you here for killing the police?" I said, "Yeah, why?" And he said, "Yeah, you all in the paper, your picture, everything." Anyway, the guys in the shower walked out the shower and started doing something else, made some other plans, do some other stuff. So I realized then the power of that article. So I said, "Hey man, if it ain't too much trouble, can I please get a copy of that article from you when you get through reading the paper?" You know. Oh, I'm this 17-year-old nerd, you know, but I'm conscious enough to realize it's power in this story. You know,
Right.
so everywhere I went in the county jail, you know, I would pull this up. "Yeah, I'm in for killing the cop, man. What's up, man? Y'all want any trouble?" You know, and that was my life. So but because I was actually innocent, I as soon as I got to prison, I went to school, I got my GED. They had a college program. I signed up for the college program. I got a job in the law library, and that became my life, you know, trying to file my way out of prison. So now I never told Dr. King this. Let me tell you this story here. This is where God.
So Charles, you've been holding off on telling me this story until
I
now.
can't wait, actually.
Let's
this is
have
where
it.
God comes into play. You know, I'm like 21 years old. You know, I'm going to college. I got these lofty ideals and goals. I'm gonna get out. I'm gonna run for public office. I'm gonna do all this other stuff. So I get to the county jail, and the neighbor is a guy my neighbor in the county jail is a guy that I grew up with. And so he say, "Hey, man, they got this drug out here called rock, and they making $10,000 a day selling it." I was like, $10,000 a day. Okay, I know this guy from New York. I know this guy from Texas. That's what they was talking about with that cocaine. Bam, my mind went left. So now all I'm thinking about is how I'm gonna get out and control the east side of Detroit. Because I know I can do it because my reputation is gonna lead me there. Long story short, the judge denied the motion, sent me back to prison. I'm in the van, I'm chained up, going back to prison, and I'm thinking this is the best thing that could have happened to me. It is the best thing that could have happened to me because I'm not ready to go back out there in society because I'm gonna be more of a problem than a solution. So I ended up going back to prison. Okay, so we fast forward 5 years later, I go back to court again. And I didn't change my goals. Now, you know, I'm gonna get out and I'm gonna run for public office. I'm gonna do all this other stuff. I'm gonna change the community. I get down there and the guy tell me, say, "Hey man, they got these you know the Curry boys?" I say, "The Curry boys." I say, "Leo and Johnny." I say, "Yeah, man, I grew up with them. We went to school together." You know, he say, "Man, they millionaires." Now, no, not Leo and Johnny. Them two punks, they millionaires. They millionaires. Them two punks, you know. So my mind changed again, you know. Now it's like, man, I got to get out. I got to take the dope game from them. I got to expand it. I know how I can, you know, put drugs down the whole East Coast. And so God sent me back to prison again, you know, which he should have, you know. And so that happened about 3 times until finally the 4th time, I had like about 40 hearings. So I'm old enough to realize what I went through and how my mind changed. So now I'm 60 years old and I'm like, I can't see that in my future no more, you know. And so finally, when I was ready, God opened the door and let me out.
So Charles, those are really compelling stories, right?
Yeah.
I wanna kind of skip back a little. So it took you a couple of years, well, quite a few years, before your brain began to mature.
Okay, I went to prison 18 years old. I'm a celebrity in prison, you know, because I'm in the joint for killing a cop. I'm a celebrity. So I'm not facing the same challenges that other guys are facing because everybody is terrified of me, you know. So when I come around, hey man, that's that guy that killed the cop, man. You don't want to mess with him.
But I want to emphasize, but you did not kill a cop.
Right.
Right. So you went to jail or prison actually for a crime that you were innocent of.
Had nothing to do with it, didn't know anything about it, any of that.
Matter of fact, I distinctly remember when I met you for the first time, and when I met you, and you may not remember this, when I said to you, or maybe you said to me that they were at age 60 or 62 or whatever your age was at the time, you said they were willing to give you a deal that if you pled guilty, they were going to commute your sentence from life without parole to time served or something like that. And I said to you, why wouldn't you plead guilty and just get out? And you said to me, no, I am not going to plead guilty to a crime that I did not commit. I remember you saying that to me. And that impressed me because, there's a number of people in prison who claim that, well, no, I didn't commit a crime, man. No, I didn't do it. It wasn't me. I wasn't there. There's someone else. But you were very clear with me that you knew that you could walk free if you wanted to, if you only pled guilty after 40 years. But you said you were not going to plead guilty, right? And as a juvenile, you were sentenced to life without parole. In other words, there's no possibility, no chance of being paroled, no chance of getting out. And that was your one chance, and you didn't take it. Why didn't you take it?
There's an exterior that we put forward for everybody else. And then it's us, it's the internal that we have to live with. So I would have had to live with myself had I made that bad choice. I would have had to live with me. And I couldn't live with me, if I got out. Like I couldn't live with myself like that.
It's
So,
very respectable for sure.
yeah, 100%. Now, while in prison, you made a lot of progress, right? You got yourself educated, and I've heard you play a musical instrument. So tell us about the skills or what you learned while you were in prison.
Okay. You want me to tell you the true story, or you want me to just tell you what
The good
sounds
skills,
good?
good skills.
It's like, even though I went to prison for a crime that I didn't commit, the murder of a police officer, I still had challenges. Not a lot of challenges, maybe not the kind that other people had, but I still had challenges, and I still had to deal with them. Good example would be, I don't know, maybe I should tell you this, maybe I shouldn't, I don't know. But guy threw a love note on my bed one day, and I picked it up and I read it, the note. I said, hey man, who is this? You playing? Is this a game or something? So the guy came down base. He said, no, man, this is me, man. I'm in love with you. And so I hollered down to Chicago. I say, hey, man, bring that big one out, man. This guy got to go. And when I came out, I probably stabbed him about 8 or 9 times. The only thing that really stopped me from killing him was an officer on the roof who had a gun, and he fired a couple shots. Bow, bow. And so I stopped then, and I gave him a pass. But he was messed up because they had to bring an ambulance all the way. They never do that. They brought an ambulance on the compound to get him to save his life. But anyway, that was one situation. And so by the time that got around the whole prison complex, I had killed 10 people or 12 people or whatever it was. So anyway, after that, I didn't have those challenges anymore. I didn't have people, looking at me funny or trying to take anything from me, because they knew that, I was going to fight. I was going to stand up, and I developed a reputation undeserving of being a stone gangster on the yard.
Yeah. And you also.
So that allowed me to go to church, to play piano in the church without anybody labeling me or calling me a sissy or, challenging me. It allowed me to go to college. It allowed me to, I had to literally threaten a librarian to get a job in the library. I don't tell too many people that, but I went to him. I was like, man, you know I'm in the joint for killing a cop, man. Don't make me have to come up here and kill you, man, because I'm gonna have to get a job up here, or I'm going to the hole for killing you. And so he gave me a job, you know. And so that's how I got the job in the law library, you know, because they had a long waiting list. And I was like, man, I ain't got time to be waiting for no list on no list for years for a job. I'm trying to get out, you know.
And if I could chime in, Mr. Lewis, I bet you probably felt like you needed to do stuff like that as a 17-year-old who just been sent to an adult prison, right? Did you feel fairly vulnerable in that situation?
Well, I was actually 18 when I got to prison.
18-year-old.
17 in the county jail. But by the time I got to prison, I was 18. So yeah, it was a little different. You know, it was man, prison was for no games back in the 70s. It wasn't for no games, period. And only the strong survived. And that's the fact. You know, the strong played on the weak, and the weak played on, you know, the whoever was, but you know, it was rough. It was rough.
So
you said undeserving when you were talking about the way you got to the top of the prison, essentially. I don't think it's undeserving. You served all that time for a crime you never committed. That's deserving.
You know. And then I was in a real radical organization called the Melanic Islamic Palace of the Rising Sun. And the Melanics were like the Nation of Islam on steroids. Very disciplined. We didn't drink. We didn't smoke. You know, we worked out every day, and we handled problems severely.
Yeah.
So we had a reputation. So they knew if you were a Melanic, don't mess with you because you was gonna knock their head off.
Yeah, yeah. Charles, I remember when we went to court for your hearing, right? The same prosecutor who had sentenced you was present in court.
Yeah.
And he really didn't have any great memory of sending you to prison. It was just maybe like another notch on his belt. You know, this kid was sent to prison 40 years ago. He didn't know who you were. And the current prosecutor, the guy who was prosecuting your appeal, he was dead set on you remaining in prison for the rest of your life. Even though you had demonstrated through the years all of the progress that you had made, right? You had reformed yourself. You had become a mature, responsible guy. You were playing the piano or the organ in church, in prison for a number of years. Matter of fact, I think when I looked at your record, like 20 years before that, you were like squeaky clean. You were doing all of the right things, right? So you demonstrated that there could be rehabilitation for the juvenile brain. You had become a man. Of course, there were still adverse circumstances in prison that you had to deal with, right? But by and large, you had made a lot of progress. But that prosecutor was saying, nope, nope, nope. You got to stay in prison for the rest of your life. What was that like for you?
You know, I first experienced racism when we moved on Kilbourne. We were the only Black family on the block. I have no idea why my parents decided to move to an all-white neighborhood, but they did. And it was very different. And I got to experience racism for the first time. So anyway, we fast forward to this prosecutor. I'm very aware of who he is and his mentality because I experienced that as a kid, you know. And not only was he caught up on that, you know, I don't know if you remember this, Mr. King, but there was a judge who dismissed my case. And the order was stuck in some paperwork. So by accident, they sent it to me. And so I took it to the ward and I said, hey, look, I'm not supposed to be here. Here's a court order right here dismissing my conviction. And then they said I forged the order. You know, and now how I'm gonna forge a court order and put all this stuff on court documents and dockets and all that. I don't know how I was supposed to do all that. but he was very aware of that, and so he just was who he was,
So you're one of the few juvenile lifers to actually make it out, because in this country, right, we have about 10,000 children who are incarcerated in adult prisons. When you think about that number for a minute, 10,000 children who
Yeah.
are incarcerated with the adult population. And in the adult population, we have about 2 million people who are incarcerated either in the county jail or in prisons around this country. So, Matt, and now in Michigan, where we reside, I know that you're in Atlanta, we have over 200 children who are incarcerated. Juvenile lifers is the name that they give them, meaning that these are kids who are not ever going to see the light of day because they have been sentenced to life without parole. And with that in mind, Kerry, I want to ask you, I know that we spoke a little about that the ruling of the United States Supreme Court. I think it was in 2012, Miller v. Alabama. So tell us a little about that.
I can speak a little bit about the
Sure.
decision. It was 2012, opinion written by Elena Kagan. This was a
Yeah,
5-4 decision.
Yeah.
So just by one vote, it would probably go different in front of today's court, but by one court vote, the Supreme Court held that sentencing anyone under the age of 18 to a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole violates the Eighth Amendment's ban on cruel and unusual punishments. So one of the most landmark decisions on the Eighth Amendment and on sentencing in recent years. And
If I could just piggyback just
Please.
a little bit.
Sure.
That was two 14-year-old kids.
Yes.
One black, clearly innocent, one white, clearly guilty. So, and I don't think it was an accident that they picked those two particular cases. And the case is called Miller versus Alabama. But
Yep.
the other guy, I believe his name was Jackson.
Yep.
He didn't have nothing to do with nothing. And he got sentenced to life without parole. And so they ruled that life without parole was an unconstitutional sentence. And they said that you only could get that sentence if they ruled that you were incorrigible and you were beyond
Mhm.
redemption. And
Correct.
so,
If you can't be rehabilitated. Yep.
Correct.
Right.
So
I was one of the first ones to have a hearing on that. I think I even had a hearing before those two guys,
really,
But
Wow.
yeah, it
so
was.
did your case go to the Michigan Supreme Court?
I filed all the way to the United States Supreme Court. I won in the
Really?
United States Supreme Court. Yeah,
I didn't know that.
So I was blessed. I had a young black female judge who at one point in the hearing said, Mr. Lewis, I wasn't even alive when this happened, but she let me go, and I still keep in contact with her, to this day.
Yeah, in fact, at some point, we plan to interview her if we can, just to get her impression, because I know that she remembers you very well.
Yeah, I still stay in contact. In fact, I got a message from her today where I had sent her a message about her father passing. Her father died in March.
Okay.
And I sent my condolences, and she sent me a message today.
Very good, very good, very good. Great. So in sort of tying everything together, why are we doing this? Why are we talking about juvenile lifers? We're doing this because I know that there are a number of juveniles who are currently incarcerated, and there are a number of juveniles who are ripping and running the streets and getting themselves involved in all kinds of problems and feeling that, that they're just bad to the bone and nothing bad can happen to them. And I'm hoping that somehow that they will get a chance to view this podcast, right? So, and hopefully it will make a difference. That's one of our goals. Another one is that someone like you, who were incarcerated and was supposed to have been sentenced to life without parole, you were able to turn your life around.
Yeah.
And now you're a respectable person in society working hard just like everyone else. And so when prosecutors make a statement that some juveniles cannot be rehabilitated because they committed a heinous crime, I point to you and I point to several other juveniles that we have worked with quite successfully, and our success rate now is mounting. And we're showing that this statement about this person being irrevocably corrupt or this person cannot be rehabilitated is not true, because how can you make such a statement when someone is 14 or 15? Not unless you're a god can you say, I know that this person can never be rehabilitated. So I think your life is a testimony to how someone can work with the system, turn their life around, and be a productive citizen. So, what are you doing right now? Kind of close us out. What are you doing right now with your life?
I work at Emory Hospital, and I'm the maintenance guy. I change light bulbs and put in toilet paper dispensers, and I do all that kind of stuff. Um, but and then I'm 65 years old. I'm old. I catch the flux trying to walk across the street, you know. So I'm an old man now, you know what I'm saying? And my best years are in my rearview mirror. I realize that, I'm an old man. So, but I greatly appreciate freedom. I greatly appreciate living as a productive member of society. And so, people have to make their own choices because everybody has a bad story. I mean, everybody that you see that you look up to, like Beyonce, Jay-Z, and all of them, they all have, something that they had experienced. Jay-Z sold drugs out the Marcy projects, and he stabbed a guy, so he has a backstory. We all have backstory, but it's what you do moving forward that's going to determine the outcome. Like I got two boys that I live with, 13 and 15. And I'm always telling these young boys, look, man, the choices that you make is consequences, good or bad. You make good choices, good consequences. You make bad choices, bad consequences, And so I encourage them to be productive citizens. I encourage them to stay in school, stay out of gangs, just live productive lives, So I hope I'm making a difference with them.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, you have no idea where this recording is going to go. You don't know who's going to watch it, who's going to see it. Maybe it's going to be in a school, maybe it's going to be in a prison. We don't know, but we're hoping that it's going to make a difference in the life of someone.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, because
so
trying to be somebody in the penitentiary is nothing. You try to be a nobody in society. Stay in society and be a nobody. Don't try to be somebody in prison. Because I've been there and done that. You know what I'm saying? I was trying to be somebody in prison, and to some nobodies. I don't. So, but it was a pleasure meeting you. Law is my thing. I love law. I got introduced to it at 18. And I probably, if I would have got out a little earlier, I probably would have went to law school and became a lawyer. But that ship sailed, But I do have quite a bit of legal knowledge.
I bet you do, Mr. Lewis. And let me just say, it was a pleasure being able to hear you tell your story. I did look up and I found your petition to the U.S. Supreme Court, where they agreed to vacate and remand your case back to the Supreme Court of Michigan in light of the Montgomery versus Louisiana and Miller versus Alabama decisions. So yeah, you went all the way, and you I bet in those years you had working in the prison library, even though you had to, you know, use a
Anyway.
crime you didn't even commit to threaten a librarian to get the job there. I bet you learned a hell of a lot and know a lot more than young lawyers like me in some senses. But just the fact that you had to spend decades of your life, not just for the wrongfulness of being a juvenile sentenced to life, but the wrongfulness of being wrongfully convicted for something you didn't do. Two
Well, like
awful
it's
things
easy
at
to
once.
focus on that, but I need you to focus on this. Every time I went back to court, I made bad decisions, and God is not going to respect that. Like I went back to court, and my mind flipped from getting out and becoming a politician to being the biggest drug dealer in the world, and I probably would have been if I would have got out. And so I'm glad that I didn't get out because I had some people like the Curry boys. I couldn't respect them because I used to chase them home from school. So it's hard to see them, being as big as they are in the drug game, worth $300-400 million. I just couldn't, if they can do it, I definitely can do it because they pump.
I think you should, in my opinion, you should have been given the chance to be out and to become a dope king, even if you would have been convicted for it later. You shouldn't be in prison just because you're thinking about selling
all
dope.
the people that you read about in Detroit, because Detroit has a hell of a crime world. I would have been a part of that. I would have been deep in that, and I'm glad that I didn't get the opportunity to get out and
well, that's
explore
good
that.
perspective of that. I gotta respect that.
He could have been a different
God saved a
statistic,
lot
and
of
that's
people's
not.
lives by keeping me in prison.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, listen,
I wasn't ready.
gentlemen and lady, this has been an energizing conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I did not doze off for 1 minute. And I thank you for joining. And I'm pretty sure we're going to have to do a part 2. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Yeah.
It was nice to meet you, Charles, finally.
Hey,
Thank you.
it's really
Thank you.
nice to meet you too.
That was awesome and amazing.
Now I can move.